When her name appeared on the performance list, the whole school burst into laughter. Emily Carter from the torn-up container park had signed up for a solo. No music, no microphone. No one believed it was real. They thought it was a joke. But the moment she began to sing, the entire auditorium fell silent. And when a woman stood up from the crowd saying nothing, only placing her hand over her heart, the whole world began to listen again to the things they had long forgotten. This wasn't just a song. This was a life. And you can't miss this story. In a hidden corner of South Tulsa, Oklahoma, there exists a neighborhood that even Google Maps struggles to pinpoint accurately. It isn't exactly a slum, but rather a patchwork of old shipping containers converted into makeshift homes, stacked, boarded, patched with duct tape, and held together by the quiet resilience of those who have no other choice. Inside one of these containers lived the Carter family, Tracy and her daughter, Emily. The container, weathered by sun and rain, had a flashlight taped over the door in place of a sensor light. Whenever the wind picked up, the metal sheets on the roof groaned like someone sighing in the dark. There was no house number, no nameplate, no mailbox. But to 13-year-old Emily Carter, it was home. At the very least, it didn't judge her. Emily was a small girl with messy brown hair, sun-darkened skin, and a tattered hoodie her mother had bought from a clearance bin. School was the only place she encountered the outside world on a daily basis, and also where she learned to be the quietest. She wasn't remarkable, energetic, athletic, or outspoken. If someone asked, "Who's Carter?" most classmates would shrug. But a small group would remember she was the girl with torn shoes, a worn-out backpack, and the one some whispered about behind her back, calling her trash. Every morning, before dawn broke, Emily would wake up with her mother. At 4:30 a.m., March in Oklahoma was still bitterly cold. They'd wrap themselves in scarves and thick jackets, walking nearly 2 kilometers to the laundromat where Tracy worked the early cleaning shift. Their tasks were simple: wipe down machines, take out the trash, refill softener tanks. No one noticed, no one thanked them. But if they didn't show up, the whole street would descend into chaos. Her mother, Tracy Carter, was once a woman with dreams. She had dreamed of singing in lounge bars. But after getting pregnant at 19 and being disowned by her family, she dropped out of school and bounced from state to state trying to survive. She eventually stopped in Tulsa. And she made herself a promise. No matter what happens, my daughter will grow up knowing she has worth. Tracy often picked up night shifts at a diner, but never let go of one ritual: coming home and turning on an old cassette player to play folk songs. Wild Mountain Time, You Are My Sunshine, Scarborough Fair. These songs became Emily's only lullabies. Not because of the lyrics, but because of the sound of her mother's voice, tired, but still singing, as if to fight off the cruelty of the world. Emily didn't know how to sing on key, but she learned to hold a note like her mother. She learned to keep rhythm with her eyes. She learned to pause in silence at just the right moment. Music wasn't a subject or a performance to her. It was an escape, a door that briefly opened whenever the world shut tight. At school, Emily rarely spoke, but every time she passed by the music room, she would stop for a few seconds to listen. Once, when the teacher played the instrumental version of Amazing Grace, Emily quietly hummed along just a whisper. But that whisper startled a student who turned around to look. Emily flushed, bowed her head, and fell silent. She didn't know she had just revealed something. Emily kept a notebook her mother gave her for her 11th birthday. In it, she wrote lyrics. Some her mother sang, others she dreamed up. The pages were smudged with ink, but every word was life, a place where she wasn't mocked, scolded, or excluded. One day, while the class was rehearsing choral parts, the music teacher suddenly stopped and asked, "Who just sang the harmony?" The room went quiet. No one pointed, but she noticed Emily trembling slightly, her eyes flickering with fear. The teacher smiled, saying nothing more. But in that smile, there was something that made Emily feel for the first time that maybe she wasn't just a shadow. That night, while the two of them were cleaning their home, Tracy asked, "Do you still remember the lullaby I used to sing to you?" Emily nodded, looking up. "I remember. You used to fold blankets while singing Wild Mountain Time." "If one day you ever want to sing," her mother said softly, "don't do it for applause. Sing because you want to exist in your own voice." Emily didn't respond. But when she opened her notebook and wrote down that song's lyrics on the final page, her handwriting tilted and slightly shaky. She made a silent promise, not to her mother, but to herself. A promise that if one day she had the chance to sing in front of the world, her voice would not just be sound, it would be a response to all the years she had lived in silence. That Monday, there was a buzz in the classroom, unlike usual. A large poster had been pinned to the hallway bulletin board, bright red, bold letters. Talent Week officially begins. The whole school was buzzing with excitement. Sign-up sheets were taped underneath the announcement, and students rushed to claim spots, chattering non-stop during breaks. Willard Middle School prided itself on personal highlights. Those with talent, those who stood out, those who could make an impression, quickly became favorites. For many students, it was a chance to shine. For others, it was the perfect moment to create a viral TikTok or get featured on the school's internal media channel. For Emily Carter, it was a world that didn't belong to her. That afternoon, as the bell rang to end class, Emily was quietly packing up her books when she heard giggles echoing from the hallway. A crowd had gathered around the bulletin board. Then a voice rang out, half shocked, half mocking. "Hey, Emily Carter, she signed up to sing." The hallway exploded with laughter. A few students turned to glance at Emily. One even pulled out a phone to snap a photo of the list. "Singing for real? Or like Container Park karaoke? Bet she's gonna beatbox with a rice cooker." Emily stood frozen. She had no idea what was happening. She hadn't signed up. Walking over to the board, she saw her name scribbled at the bottom of the list in messy, slanted handwriting. Emily Carter, vocal, no backing track. She knew instantly it wasn't her handwriting. Someone had written her name as a joke, just to amuse the crowd. Her hand trembled slightly. Her heart pounded in her chest. Behind her, the whispers spread like ripples in water. Emily could have easily torn the paper down. She could have gone straight to the office and said someone was mocking her. But she didn't. Not because she wasn't embarrassed, but because, for the first time, amidst all the mocking eyes, one unexpected thought passed through her mind. What if I really did sing this time? That night, back in the container, while her mother was washing dishes using leftover soapy water from the laundry bucket, Emily opened her notebook. The final page still held the lyrics of an old song, Wild Mountain Time, the song her mother often hummed while folding clothes. A song that felt like wind drifting through a green valley, gentle yet haunting. Emily stood by the door and sang. Just a few lines. Her voice was still hesitant, unsure of the rhythm. But for the first time, in her mother's eyes, there was no questioning, no surprise, only quiet listening. "You're really going to do it?" Tracy asked softly. Emily nodded. "They wrote my name up there to laugh at me, but if I erase it, I'll be proving them right." Tracy didn't say anything at first. She wiped her hands on an old rag and sat beside her daughter. The flashlight, taped to the ceiling, flickered like a trembling heartbeat. "I used to dream of standing on a stage," she said evenly. "But when your grandma got sick, I had to quit school to care for her. And life just went on." Emily looked at her mother, eyes wide. "Do you regret it?" Tracy shook her head. "Number. But if I get to see you on that stage, it'd be the most beautiful gift I've ever received." Those words caught in Emily's throat. She gripped her notebook tightly, trying to swallow back a quiet sob. "You'll be there, right?" Tracy smiled, though the dark circles under her eyes made her look like she hadn't slept in 3 nights. "Even if I have to walk, I'll be there." That night, when the container's lights went out and only the moonlight seeped through the cracked roof, Emily lay awake. She couldn't sleep. Not out of fear, but because something strange had begun to grow in her chest. Hope. The next day during recess, Emily stood before the bulletin board. In her hand was a tiny pencil, worn down nearly to the tip. Her name was still there, still in that jagged handwriting, still followed by quiet giggles behind her. But instead of erasing it, she quietly added her name again, this time on the next line, in her own soft, slanted handwriting. Emily Carter. Vocal. A cappella. No one laughed anymore, because at that moment, no one believed she would actually go through with it. But Emily did the unthinkable. She took a cruel joke and turned it into a declaration. On Friday afternoon, Willard Middle School held its final rehearsal for Talent Week in the main auditorium. The stage was a simple wooden platform, the lighting basic, no professional sound system like those in real performance venues, but for the students, this was their arena, the place to show who they were. Emily arrived early. In her hands was her old notebook, the last page still bearing the lyrics to Wild Mountain Time, written in slanted blue ink, uneven on the lines. Her mother couldn't come that day due to a sudden overtime shift. But before she left home, she had held Emily tightly and whispered, "Even if I'm not beside you, your voice will tell the world everything I couldn't." In the auditorium, the other students arrived, buzzing with energy. A dance group brought along a Bluetooth speaker. A boy from an upper grade hauled in an electric keyboard, ready to perform his own EDM remix. A girl in a pink-fringed dress clutched a wireless mic, rehearsing her pop song cover. Emily sat quietly in the very back row, gripping her notebook. No one noticed her. A few students passed by, glanced at her, giggled, then moved on. No one stopped to speak. No one thought she'd actually step on that stage. When it was her turn, a tech teacher standing backstage looked at the list and frowned. "Emily Carter? No backing track? No mic? I'll sing it raw, sir," Emily replied, her voice barely audible. "A cappella?" the teacher repeated, a bit surprised. Some heads in the front rows turned. A soft "oh" escaped someone's lips. One student shook their head. A girl nearby stifled a giggle. But Emily didn't back down. She walked onto the stage, small, quiet, standing beneath the dim, flickering yellow light that hung loosely from the ceiling. In front of her, a sea of empty chairs, a few teachers reviewing the performance list, some classmates far off scrolling on their phones. No one was really watching. Emily closed her eyes, and then she began to sing. "Oh, the summertime is coming." Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't dazzling. It didn't try to win anyone over, but it carried something no microphone could amplify. Truth. It was the sound of a small heart that had finally chosen not to hide. It was the echo of early mornings scrubbing laundromat floors, of long nights listening to raindrops fall on the tin roof of a container home. The music teacher who had been scanning her grading sheet looked up. Another teacher, mid-pour with a cup of coffee, froze, their eyes slowly drawn to the stage. Emily kept her eyes shut. The next line flowed gently, "And the trees are sweetly blooming." Her voice wasn't perfect. A few notes were slightly off. Some parts wavered, short of breath. But no one cared anymore, because the imperfections made it real. Like a whisper on a rainy afternoon. Like a lullaby someone once sang to you as a child. When she reached the final line, "And the wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather," the entire room entered a strange state. Utter silence. No applause. No laughter. No sound at all. Not because they didn't enjoy it, but because they had all forgotten what they were supposed to do after experiencing something so deeply honest. Emily opened her eyes. The room seemed frozen in that moment. Her heart pounded. Her throat was dry. Yet strangely, she no longer felt afraid. She just felt light. Then came a soft sigh from the back row. A teacher leaned over and whispered to the one beside him, "I don't know who that girl is, but I won't forget that voice." Emily gave a slight bow and stepped down. No one stopped her. No one called after her. But every pair of eyes followed. And for the first time she walked off a stage without feeling invisible. At the far end of the auditorium, as she stepped into the hallway, she met the gaze of the music teacher, the one who had once asked about the harmony during choral practice. The teacher didn't say a word. She simply nodded, then placed her hand over her heart, a quiet gesture that said, "I heard you." Emily left the hall, still clutching her notebook, her heart in turmoil. In the corridor, the chatter and laughter of other students echoed around her. Some had already posted mocking stories online. A few mimicked her voice with exaggerated falsettos as they walked by. And yet, strangely, this time she wasn't hurt, because amid all the noise, she had finally heard herself. That evening, after the rehearsal, Emily returned to the container, still in a daze. She didn't say much to her mother about the afternoon, just a quiet, "I sang today." But her eyes were different. No longer lowered in habitual silence. They held something deeper, as if, for the first time in her life, she truly felt heard. Tracy quietly set down a cheap sandwich box on the table, handed her daughter a glass of water, and sat beside her. She knew something had changed within her child, but she didn't ask. Any woman who has survived winters without enough money for heating understands there are milestones in a child's life that should not be unearthed with questions. They need to be spoken when ready or protected, left to grow like seeds in silence. The two of them ate dinner in quiet. Mashed potatoes and toast. The flashlight on the ceiling flickered rhythmically, casting dim light over the cramped room, just big enough for a bunk bed and a wooden table with one broken leg. Tracy looked at her daughter for a moment, then spoke in an even tone. "You don't have to do this for me." Emily looked up, slightly surprised. "I'm not doing it for you." She paused, took a breath, then continued, this time with more certainty. "I'm doing it for me. But if you weren't there, I don't think I'd have the courage to sing." Tracy said nothing. She simply reached out and placed her hand over Emily's calloused from years of hard work, yet still gentle, just like when she used to brush Emily's hair before school. Emily didn't pull away. After a while, Emily asked, "The day you had to drop out of school, did you ever think you'd failed?" Tracy was silent. She bowed her head slightly. "Yes, I thought I'd lost everything. My dreams, my friends, my hope for the future. But then one morning, I woke up and saw myself holding you. And the way your eyes looked at me, it felt like I was your whole world." Emily stared at her mother for a long time. For the first time, she saw that those tired eyes held more than weariness. They held the light of something holier than strength. Unconditional love. "You'll come, right?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course. Even if I have to walk the whole way, I'll be there." Emily lowered her head, lips pressed tight, trying not to let the tears fall. "Then, after I sing, can you do one thing for me?" Tracy tilted her head gently. "What is it?" "Just stand up. You don't have to clap. You don't have to say anything. But I want, when the song ends, for you to be the first one to stand." The room grew still. Tracy didn't respond right away. She gave her daughter's hand a gentle squeeze and then smiled softly. "All right. I promise." That promise, as light as a breeze was, for Emily, the anchor that would keep her soul grounded through the storms of fear. After dinner, while Tracy rested from her triple shift, Emily sat by the window, rewriting the lyrics once more in her notebook. Each letter leaned slightly to the left, a childhood habit from using dull pencils. She didn't correct it. Because for Emily, music wasn't about perfection. It was the place where even the crooked things belonged. She whispered the lines to herself. "Will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together, where the wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather." Then she closed the notebook, slipped it under her pillow, and murmured softly, "I will go, because you've stood still your whole life." The next morning, Tracy left a note before heading out for work. "My dearest girl, I've prepared your dress. It's not fancy, but it's clean. I ironed every fold. Don't forget to stand tall when you sing. And if you don't see me in the crowd, look at the third row by the window. I'll be there hand over my heart." Emily read the note, folded it neatly, and tucked it into her backpack alongside her notebook. On the way to school, she walked more slowly than usual, but she stood straighter. In her mind, there were no more jeers, no more self-doubt. Only one image remained. Her mother, rising to her feet, in a room full of strangers, silent but strong like a monument. Because sometimes, when a mother stands, she becomes the launch pad for a dream to take flight. Monday morning. The sky over Tulsa was veiled in a pale mist, the sun soft, not blazing, but bright enough to mark the beginning of something special. Willard Middle School was decked out with pastel-colored balloons and festive banners lining the hallway. A makeshift stage stood at the center of the main hall, lit with modest lighting, and above it, a red electronic sign read, "Willard Talent Week. Let your light shine." Emily arrived early. She wore the white dress her mother had pressed so carefully, the only undamaged one in her closet. Her hair was braided into two neat plaits, tied with old ribbon. On her wrist, she wore a bracelet woven from red thread, a handmade gift her mother had crafted when Emily was 8, after a long night shift that left her hands raw and bleeding. She clutched her familiar notebook. Her palms were damp with sweat, not from fear, but from the weight of reality. This was no longer a joke, no longer a half-empty rehearsal room. Today, every eye would be on the stage, and Emily knew some of those eyes were just waiting for her to fail. Her mother, Tracy Carter, arrived at the hall just minutes later. She wore a faded blouse and old slacks, her hair pulled into a tidy bun, her face a little pale from the overnight shift at the diner. But in her eyes, there was no exhaustion, only a quiet, undeniable pride. She found her promised spot, third row, by the window. Emily didn't wave, didn't signal. She merely glanced briefly, and caught sight of her mother among the well-dressed crowd of parents, some holding bouquets, others with professional cameras. But that one glance was enough. She knew she wasn't alone. The performances began. A modern dance group hyped the crowd with a booming remix, met with loud applause. A boy played electronic drums as LED lights pulsed with every beat. A girl in a glittery pink dress sang a pop cover into a wireless mic, backed by heart-shaped animations flashing on the big screen behind her. Emily sat alone in the wings, waiting. No one spoke to her. A group of students walked by, whispering and chuckling, sneaking glances her way. One girl leaned over to her friend and whispered, "Here comes the fairy tale act. I heard there's no mic, no beat. She's probably singing on pure hope." Some already had their phones out, meme filters ready prepared to capture what they assumed would be a laughable disaster. Then her name was called. Next up, a solo vocal performance without background music. Please welcome Emily Carter. Scattered claps, a few stifled chuckles, curious, skeptical glances. Emily stood. Every step she took across the wooden stage echoed in her mind, not just the sound of footsteps, but the sound of every quiet burden she'd carried, of morning scrubbing, washing machines, of nights dreaming to her mother's soft voice, of rushed lunches made of half a sandwich to save money for notebooks. The spotlight hit her eyes, too bright to see the crowd, but she knew her mother was out there somewhere, third row by the window. And even if she couldn't see her, she could feel her. That gaze that never wavered. That gaze that had always seen her, even when the world didn't. Emily stood center stage. No mic, no music. The music teacher stood off to the side, hand gently gripping her pen. A parent in the back adjusted a video camera. The whole hall held its breath. Emily took a deep breath, and then she sang, "Are you going to Scarborough Fair?" The first note floated into the room like a whisper. Soft, clear, unpretentious. Not striving to impress, but flying straight into the hearts of those who had forgotten how to listen. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. The whispers fell silent. Phone clicks stopped. An elderly woman took off her glasses, blinking slowly. A teacher looked up from his notes, transfixed. Emily kept singing. No dramatic peaks, no technical flourishes, but each word struck a chord. In the memories of children who remembered being sung to while sick, in the silence of afternoons too loud to endure anything else. Each line was woven from the fragments of a life. The sound of freight trains in the night, the faint scent of laundry soap on fingertips, the murmur of a mother folding blankets and singing under her breath. It was music that didn't need a stage, only a heart willing to hear it. And when the final line faded into the air, "Then he shall be a true love of mine," the auditorium fell utterly still. One beat, two beats, three. No one moved. Then, one person stood. It was Tracy Carter. No clapping, no shouting. Just standing, hand over her heart, eyes shining, lips trembling, with a proud, silent smile. That image struck something deep within the room. Then another stood, and another, until the entire auditorium, over 300 people, rose in reverent silence, as if what they had witnessed wasn't just a performance, but a moment of one human being fully becoming herself. Emily remained standing, clutching the hem of her dress, her eyes glistening but dry. The light bathed her face, not bright or glamorous, but just enough to turn a once invisible girl into someone unforgettable. The performance had ended. The applause had faded. People began to leave the auditorium in a soft murmur, yet slower than usual, as if they had just passed through a quiet rainstorm of memories and weren't quite ready to return to the blinding sun of everyday life. Emily stood backstage, frozen, unsure of what to do next. Other performers were busy taking group selfies, swapping Instagram handles, and buzzing about how many views their videos would get on the school's media page. She just stood there, hands clasped tightly together, eyes fixed on the scuffed wooden floor, worn down by countless footsteps. Tracy Carter made her way through the crowd, her worn shoes tapping gently against the stairs leading up to the stage. As she reached her daughter, Emily looked up, but before she could say a word, Tracy wrapped her in a hug. No words, just an embrace that lasted longer than usual. as if she was trying to pour all the years of unspoken pride into a single unforgettable moment. A short while later, as the two of them prepared to leave the hall, a woman approached from the guest seating area. She wore an ivory blouse, her light brown hair pulled into a low bun. On her collar, a small name badge read, Ava Reynolds, Phoenix Youth Music Conservatory. Emily Carter? She said, her voice gentle but clear. Emily turned and nodded slightly. Tracy instinctively squeezed her daughter's hand. Ava smiled, not stepping too close, as if she understood that some people need space to feel safe. I'm Ava Reynolds. I wasn't here today to scout talent. I actually came with my niece. She was in the first dance act. Emily hesitated, unsure how to respond. Ava continued, her gaze both kind and precise. But when you sang, I had to stop. I couldn't look away. And I felt I needed to speak with you. Tracy shifted slightly, taking a subtle step back, trying not to impose. But her hand remained firmly on Emily's shoulder. She said nothing, but her eyes were sharp, evaluating the woman in front of them, someone who seemed to be offering more than just kind words. I'm the artistic director at a youth music conservatory in Phoenix, Ava explained. We have a special program for young artists with potential, particularly those from difficult backgrounds. Every year we choose only 2, and I think I may have found one of them today. Emily's eyes widened. She wasn't even sure she'd heard correctly. You don't have to decide anything right away, Ava added, her tone slower, deeper now. But if you're open to it, we're holding a small audition this weekend at our downtown studio. It's not a test, just a simple recording session to learn more about your voice. Mother and daughter stood still. A chance? For Emily? After years of mopping floors and listening to cassette tapes? You think I could be a singer? Emily asked honestly. Ava smiled. Not the kind of smile from someone above you, but the warm, knowing smile of someone who's walked the road before. I don't think you should be a singer. I think you deserve to be heard. Silence fell. Tracy looked at her daughter, then gave a small nod, the kind of permission that needs no words. Emily looked back at Ava, gathering every ounce of courage. I want to try. Ava handed her a small piece of paper, the studio's address, audition time, and a contact number. Good. I'll be waiting. And one more thing, she added, turning to leave, then pausing with a knowing look. You don't need to do anything more than what you did today. Not more, not less. That night, inside the dim container, Emily carefully taped the audition note to the wall, right beside the flashlight. Beneath it was a line her mother had scribbled in black ink the year before. As long as you still have your voice, you still have hope. Tracy sat nearby, holding a white shirt she was about to wash. Are you scared? She asked. Emily nodded. But I also feel excited, she whispered. Then that's enough, Tracy said, her voice as soft as a breath. And for the first time in a very long while, inside a home without electricity, without hot water, without Wi-Fi, a light truly began to shine, not from a bulb, but from a growing belief in the hearts of 2 people who had grown used to living in the dark. Saturday morning, the Oklahoma sky hung low with gray clouds. A cool breeze swept gently through the old brick streets of downtown. Tracy Carter and Emily stood in front of a modest 2-story building with frosted glass panels. A small sign on the door read, Silverline Recording Studio, where voices begin. Emily gripped the straps of her backpack tightly. Inside was her old notebook like a talisman. She wore a neatly ironed white blouse her mother had prepared, paired with faded blue jeans worn thin at the knees. No makeup, no perfume. Just the pounding of her heart and a whisper that echoed like wind through her chest. Don't forget, sing as yourself. Ava Reynolds was already waiting at the door. Today, she was dressed simply no name badge, no elegant coat. When she saw the mother and daughter arrive, she stepped forward and opened the door, as if welcoming honored guests, not audition hopefuls. You must be Emily and your mom. Ava smiled, gently touching Tracy's shoulder in a gesture full of respect. Everything's ready. No pressure, Emily. Just think of it like telling a story with your voice, all right? Emily nodded. Her voice was barely a breeze, but her eyes held an uncanny focus. Tracy gave her daughter's hand a light squeeze before letting go, watching her step into the recording room. Inside, warm lights glowed over dark charcoal foam panels lining the walls. A large microphone hung suspended in front of a glass window. Behind that glass was the control room, where the sound technician was prepping the equipment. The man behind the mixing desk was Leo, Mid-50s, specks of silver in his beard, glasses low on his nose, and the eyes of someone who's heard thousands of voices. "This the young singer you mentioned?" Leo asked Ava through the intercom, half skeptical, half curious. Ava didn't answer immediately. She just nodded, then spoke calmly into her headset. "Trust me, Leo. Just let her sing." Emily stepped up to the microphone. She looked around, then took a deep breath. The room was cold, but not colder than the moment she'd endured when her classmates laughed at her. Here, no one laughed. Only expectant eyes. And a silence so thick, it pressed against her skin. Leo adjusted the mic height, then spoke gently through the speaker. "You can sing anything you like." Emily glanced at Ava, her eyes asking a quiet question. Ava nodded. "The one you sang before, Scarborough Fair. If it was your mother's song, then sing it for her one more time." Emily nodded again. She closed her eyes, let her arms hang loose, then began. "Are you going to Scarborough Fair?" Just the first line, and Leo's hand froze over the console. He didn't blink, his head tilting slightly, listening more closely. "Parsley, sage, rosemary and thyme." The voice wasn't loud. It didn't command the room. It wasn't the kind that would blow the roof off on a reality show stage. But it had something far rarer. Truth. No effort to impress. No attempt to pretend. Just a 13-year-old girl pouring every memory, every cold night without power. Every quiet song hummed inside a tin box of a home. Every trace of soap on her fingers into each syllable. Leo leaned back in his chair. Ava folded her arms, her gaze softening. The room fell into a weighted stillness, the kind that only happens when sound becomes more than vibration in air. When it becomes something sacred. When the song ended, Emily opened her eyes. Her lips tightened slightly, as if she herself couldn't quite believe she had done it. The control room remained silent. Then Leo spoke, breaking the quiet. "You've never had vocal training, have you?" Emily shook her head. "I've only ever sung with my mom." Leo nodded. "Yeah, I could tell. Because you sing with your heart. No forced breath, no theatrics. But you know when to pause, when to land. That can't be taught." Ava entered the recording booth, walking slowly toward Emily, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Do you know Scarborough Fair is a folk song from the 17th century?" she said. "They used to sing it at festivals, in tiny kitchens, beside hospital beds, in lavender fields." Emily smiled. "My mom calls it a song for dreamers." Ava chuckled softly. "Maybe that's why your voice reaches other people's dreams." That afternoon, Ava sent the recording to the selection board of the Phoenix Youth Music Conservatory, where she served as artistic advisor. Attached was a short note. "No effects, no editing. Just listen and remember why we ever loved music at all." 3 weeks after the recording session, life seemed to return to normal. Emily still woke up at 4:30 a.m. to clean the laundromat with her mom. She still wore the same faded hoodie and worn-out shoes. Still ate her lunch, wrapped in old newspaper, a simple sandwich. No one at school mentioned the performance. No one brought up the recording. And to Emily, that didn't matter anymore. She no longer lived for compliments. She no longer waited for recognition. But deep in her heart, she still remembered her mother's eyes the moment she stood up in that auditorium. That was the first light Emily had ever seen so clearly in a life mostly lived in shadows. That Wednesday afternoon, as Emily returned from school, Tracy handed her a pale blue envelope. "You've got mail," her mother said in a casual voice, though her trembling hands gave her away. Emily took it, noticing the logo in the top left corner, a phoenix spreading its wings inside a circle of musical notes. Below it, the words, "Phoenix Youth Music Conservatory." Her heart skipped. She didn't open it right away. Her fingers gently ran across the envelope, as if afraid she might tear something sacred. Then slowly, she peeled back the seal. The paper inside was thick, white, with an embossed heading. "Letter of Acceptance, Special Summer Scholarship." Emily read without blinking. In her head, only the echoes of the words remained. "We listened to your recording with deep emotion. The selection board unanimously voted in favor. We invite Emily Carter to join the Phoenix Youth Conservatory's full summer scholarship program starting in June. All expenses for housing, travel, and training will be covered." Tracy sat silently. No blinking, no words. She just looked at her daughter, waiting for a reaction. Emily placed the letter carefully on the table, her hands aligned as if it were a fragile treasure. She didn't cry. She didn't smile wide. She simply said, in a voice so soft her mother had to lean in to hear, "Mom, I got in. A Pause. I'm not sitting in the back of the class anymore." Tracy broke down. She pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her tight, sobbing soundlessly. Years of silence. Years of watching her daughter be isolated, belittled, made into a joke. All of it burst open like a locked door finally flung wide after too many years shut. They said nothing more. They just held each other. Inside that tiny container home, as if nothing outside that moment mattered anymore. That night, Tracy opened an old box of keepsakes from her youth. Inside was a photograph, her, age 17, on a church stage, holding a microphone in both hands, singing "You Are My Sunshine." Her eyes filled with dreams. "I used to think I'd never see this image again," Tracy said, handing the photo to Emily. "But now I know it never really disappeared. It just moved from me to you." Emily took the picture. The eyes in the photo and her own reflection looked strikingly alike. "Can I bring you with me?" she asked quietly. "I mean, if I go to the conservatory, can you come too?" Tracy paused. "I don't know if they'll allow it, but I can see you off if that's what you want." Emily shook her head. "Not see me off. I want you there. Like the day I sang." Tracy stared at her daughter for a long moment, then gently held her hand. "If they don't have a place for me, I'll sit in the third row by the window, just like before." Emily smiled. A small smile, but one that glowed, like the sky after a long night of rain. The next day, at school, Emily walked into class and took her usual seat last row, near the window. But this time, when the teacher called out Emily Carter, a classmate turned, smiled, and nodded. No sarcasm, no pity, just quiet, recognition. Emily didn't reply with words. She just returned a faint smile. Because the girl who sat in the back row yesterday was no longer the same girl today. Not because she sang better, but because, at last, her voice had been heard. June blazed with sunlight. The entire city of Phoenix wore a golden summer coat streets, shaded by tall trees, red brick buildings casting long reflections on stone-tiled sidewalks. The bus carrying Emily and her mother stopped at the front gates of the Phoenix Youth Music Conservatory, a sprawling campus perched on a quiet hill, where every window shimmered in the sun like tiny pieces of crystal. Tracy placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Are you ready?" Emily nodded, gripping the strap of her old canvas bag. Inside were a few clean clothes, her notebook of songs, and the red thread bracelet. The hallway leading to the dormitories opened into an entirely different world. Students walked past wearing fashionable outfits, floral dresses, crisp-collared shirts, spotless sneakers. Their luggage was adorned with logos from top music brands. One student was on a video call with her private vocal coach. Another laughed as she recounted her recent performance at Carnegie Hall. Emily didn't dare lift her head too high. She stepped carefully, slowly, as if afraid she might fall out of rhythm with the world. Her dorm room was in Building 3, second floor. When she opened the door, she found her roommate a tall girl with light brown curly hair tied in a ponytail. On the other bed sat a leather suitcase and a compact bookshelf filled with music theory manuals. "Hi, I'm Eliza. I'm from the Summerside Academy of Arts in Boston," the girl said briskly. Clear voice, eyes slightly assessing. "How long have you been studying vocal theory?" Emily hesitated. "I haven't. I just sing with my mom." Eliza pressed her lips together, didn't respond. She turned back to arranging her books, though she couldn't quite hide her surprise or her doubt. The orientation ceremony was held in the Dome Hall, a circular auditorium topped with stained glass windows glistening under the sun. Ava Reynolds was the opening speaker. She stood in the center of the light, hair glowing faintly, eyes scanning the rows of students sitting upright with focus. "Here," she began, "we don't look for perfect voices. We look for souls that can tell stories through music. Because songs are remembered not for their highest notes, but for their deepest truths." Emily felt her heart stir. But as the lights dimmed and students began to whisper among themselves, she saw Eliza lean toward the girl beside her and mutter, "Nice speech, but let's see if the girl from, where was it, Tulsa? Let's see if she can keep up." Emily heard it all. She didn't respond. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she knew she couldn't argue with words. First day of class. Vocal anatomy. On the table was a model of the human throat, each part labeled larynx, vocal cords, diaphragm, resonators. The teacher passed out thick, color-printed manuals. "Can anyone explain how the diaphragm functions during phonation?" the teacher asked. Hands shot up around the room. Emily kept her head down, pretending to read. She had never heard the term before. After class, a blonde student turned to her. "Are you a soprano or mezzo?" Emily blinked. I'm not sure. I've never been classified." The student looked confused. "You've never trained?" From the next table, Eliza interjected, half joking. "Maybe they picked her to represent regional diversity or something." Small laughter rippled through the room. Not loud, but loud enough for Emily to feel like a handmade relic in a showroom of digital displays. The days that followed were relentless. Sight singing, music theory, breath control. Emily was always a step behind. Sometimes she didn't even understand the questions. Once, during vocal exercises, she lost the rhythm and forgot the lyrics out of sheer panic. The room fell silent. Someone cleared their throat. Emily felt like her face was burning. That night, she sat alone on a stone bench outside the dorms, watching the light spill from the main building. The moon was still. No wind. The whole world felt foreign. Ava appeared behind her, holding 2 cups of warm mint tea. She sat beside Emily, saying nothing. After a long pause, Emily finally whispered, "I don't belong here." Ava handed her the tea without a word. Emily hesitated, then continued, "I come from a place where music was just my mom, singing me to sleep. I don't have technique. I don't have background. I just remember." Ava nodded. "And that," she said gently, "is exactly what this world is forgetting." Emily looked up at her, eyes wide. Ava went on, "When I was young, people used to mock my country voice too. But one of my professors once told me, technique can be taught, feeling cannot. You sing so people remember they were once loved." Emily gripped her cup a little tighter, said nothing. But something in her heart, something long dormant, began to stir again. That night, back in her room, she opened her notebook and turned to the last page where she'd written the lyrics to "You Are My Sunshine." She read them slowly, as if reciting the story of herself. And she knew. Soon, she would sing again. Not to prove anything, but to preserve the one thing this place had never known. A voice that didn't come from the stage, but from the roof of a container home, from the voice of a tired mother, and from a heart never trained, but never unloved. The second week at Phoenix Conservatory began with a basic harmony test. Emily sat at the back of the classroom, staring at the sheet as if it were written in an alien language. Chord symbols, time signatures, accidentals, they swirled in her head like a dizzying spiral. By the time her classmates were finishing question 3, she was still struggling with the first chord. A silent shame crept down her spine. She didn't dare lift her head. Every scratch of a pencil around her felt like needles pricking an already paper-thin sense of self-worth. That afternoon, in vocal technique class, Emily forgot the lyrics to Ave Maria. Not just a line, an entire verse. The teacher paused, said nothing, and then resumed the lesson without once glancing Emily's way. Eliza leaned over to whisper to the girl beside her, not even bothering to lower her voice, starting to see why she didn't train anywhere before she got here. No one laughed, but no one defended her either. And that silence was more cruel than any insult. That evening, a light rain began to fall. Emily skipped dinner. She curled up on the wooden bench outside the dorms, holding her song notebook unopened. She just sat there, like a shadow among the glowing lights of the academy's campus. Raindrops dampened her hair, soaked her shoulders, and seeped into the edges of the paper peeking from her bag. But she didn't move, because inside, something was cracking. She thought of her mother working 3 jobs to get her here. She thought of that auditorium the day her mother stood up in silence. And then she thought, what am I doing here? I'm not good enough. I don't belong. She had never felt so out of place in her life. And then, a voice came from behind. "You know, I almost quit this place too." Emily turned around. It was Mr. Jonah Marcus, the vocal technique instructor, known for being strict, but fair. He wasn't her direct teacher, but Emily had seen him a few times, observing performances with sharp, unreadable eyes. He stood under the awning, holding an umbrella. No blazer like usual, just a dark wool coat. His graying hair slightly wet from the rain. "I was 16 when I got in," he said, stepping closer. "No scholarship, no connections. I came from a small town with a thick drawl. My roommate laughed at me nonstop. Emily said nothing. She didn't know why he'd chosen now to speak. By the third week, I wrote a withdrawal letter, left it on the desk. I planned to leave the next morning. When? That calm. Emily looked up, eyes filled with curiosity. Mr. Jonah sat down beside her. That night, my vocal professor, the one I was sure hated me, knocked on my door. Didn't say much. Just asked me one question. Do you know why people still remember old songs, even if they're not perfect? Emily waited. He answered, because those songs are tied to memories, not technique. And you, Emily, are one of those songs the kind people forgot they once knew. A breeze stirred the leaves, rustling softly. You can learn technique. Take your time. But no one can teach someone how to sing with memory. Emily tightened her grip on the notebook. Her eyes fluttered, as if holding something back. Not tears, but acknowledgement. Someone had just reached the part of her she kept most hidden. I thought I had to be perfect to stay here. Mr. Jonah gave a soft chuckle. This is a conservatory, not a lab. We teach you how to sing correctly. But emotion, that's why music exists. And it's why I still remember your voice from that day in the auditorium. Emily turned toward him. You heard me sing? He nodded. And I didn't hear Scarborough Fair the way I used to. I heard a piece of real life. And I want to hear more. That night, Emily didn't go back to her room right away. She stayed, opened her notebook. The last page held the lyrics to You Are My Sunshine, the song her mother sang on rainy nights. Her hands didn't tremble anymore. She picked up a pen, and beneath the lyrics, wrote a single new line. Mom, I'll learn every note, every breath, every technique, but I will never learn to fake my heart. And Emily knew, the next morning, when the first class bell rang, she would be there. Not because she was good enough, but because she had remembered why she came here in the first place, to make sure her mother's song would never be forgotten. 1 week after that fateful rainy night, Emily walked into class as someone different. Not because she was suddenly better, but because she no longer lowered her head. In vocal technique class, she still lagged behind, still struggled with breath control and sustained notes. But for the first time, when the teacher corrected her pronunciation, she didn't blush. She nodded, took notes, asked questions, and tried again. When the music theory test was returned, it wasn't perfect, but she hadn't left anything blank. She marked each note with a pencil, used a scale reference sheet, and though it took longer than the others, she submitted her work. Neat, careful, full of effort. No one praised her out loud. Eliza still kept her distance, but slowly, the mocking glances turned into cautious ones, and the cautious ones turned into quiet acknowledgement. In week 4, the faculty made an announcement. At the end of the course, each student will perform a solo piece in the Phoenix Dome. You may choose any song in any style with no restrictions on accompaniment. That was when the real competition began. Some students rehearsed Italian arias. Others choreographed Broadway routines. Private vocal coaches were booked solid. Emily simply sat still and turned the pages of her notebook. By the end of the week, when the teacher asked what she would perform, she answered without hesitation, You Are My Sunshine. Heads turned. Someone chuckled softly. The teacher raised an eyebrow. That song is quite simple. Are you sure? Emily nodded. It's the song my mom used to sing when we walked home in the rain. She didn't need technique. Neither do I. I just want to sing it like she did. Eliza, from the front row, whispered something to the girl beside her. Emily didn't catch it. But this time, she didn't care. The final rehearsal took place on Friday afternoon. Studio Room 2 opened its doors, and one by one, students came in to test the stage. Emily was ninth. The stage was simple. Soft lighting. No microphone. No speakers. Just a small space, with 15 students and 2 faculty members seated as evaluators. When it was her turn, Emily stepped up. She didn't look around, didn't bow her head. She simply said, This song is for my mom, for nights with no electricity, and for sandwiches wrapped in old newspaper. And then, she began. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Her voice rose not as a performance, but as a stream of memory, gentle, pure, but heavy with truth. You make me happy when skies are gray. At first, some eyes still wandered, but gradually, silence spread through the room like instinct. There was something in that voice that made people stop. Not because it was technically impressive, but because it was so real. They saw themselves in it. A classmate who once chuckled at Scarborough Fair paused her note-taking. Her gaze softened. Mr. Jonas, seated in the back, nodded slightly, the light behind his glasses catching a flicker of emotion. "You'll never know, dear, how much I love you." In that voice were two people walking through the rain, sharing a hard loaf of bread because the bakery had no fresh stock left. A mother humming under her breath on cold nights without a heater. The breath of love, unpolished, but unwavering. And when the final line floated down like a thread of light, "Please don't take my sunshine away," the room remained still. No one laughed. No one clapped, not right away. Because in that moment, everyone had just been taken back to a personal, forgotten corner of their own memory, where someone had once sung them to sleep, once held them in a storm, once been their sunshine, and they'd forgotten just how much it mattered. A student wiped away a tear. A teacher dabbed their forehead with a tissue. Eliza sat in the front row. For the first time, she said nothing. She simply looked at Emily with different eyes. No more doubt. No more superiority. Just silent recognition. That night, back in her room, Emily opened her notebook. But for the first time, she didn't write new lyrics. Instead, she wrote a single line. "Today I sang with my whole past, and they heard it." That afternoon, the sky over Phoenix was overcast, as if something was about to happen, not a violent storm, but a quiet reckoning waiting to break free. Low gray clouds blanketed the glass dome of the Phoenix Dome, the legendary performance hall with over 500 seats. From early on, students and families began filling the auditorium. Colorful umbrellas lined up in long rows outside the entrance. Inside, the golden stage lights bathed the space in a warm glow, formal but intimate. Tracy Carter, dressed in a pale blue blouse and a faded cotton skirt, stepped into the fourth row, carrying a small pastry box and a handkerchief embroidered with the name Emily in red thread. Her hair was still damp from the rain, her eyes tired from a 12-hour overnight bus ride. Yet her face glowed with something deeper than rest, a quiet radiance that seemed to come from within, not from the weather. All around her were parents dressed to impress. Blazers, silk ties, expensive watches. But Tracy didn't flinch. She had been through far worse. And today, her daughter would stand on this stage. After an opening program filled with classical solos, Broadway numbers, and a large choral ensemble, the announcer's voice rang out through the mic. "And now, please welcome our next solo performance, Emily Carter from Tulsa, Oklahoma, with You Are My Sunshine." A stir rippled through the crowd. Whispers broke out. "A children's song? That's a strange choice." One teacher on the judging panel lifted a pen, expression unreadable, not dismissive, not eager, just waiting. And then Emily walked out. She wore a pale blue dress stitched together from two old shirts, a farewell gift from her former teacher. Her white canvas shoes had been scrubbed clean, her hair tied back simply. Around her neck was a pendant shaped like a tiny sun, the only birthday gift her mother had ever bought. When she turned 10, Emily walked slowly, one step at a time, as if she wasn't stepping onto a stage, but toward something sacred, something she had once believed would never belong to her. She stopped at center stage. The lights converged on her. In the fourth row, her mother's face came into view, Tracy sitting upright, hand over her heart, eyes locked on her daughter. Emily didn't scan the crowd. She looked to the fourth row, near the window. Then she closed her eyes. "You are my sunshine." The voice rose, soft, raw, unadorned. No effects, no embellishments, only the full presence of a real human being. "My only sunshine." Each line was wrapped in memory. The sound of wind through the container roof, the whir of laundry machines at dawn, her mother humming while folding clothes at night. Nothing forced, nothing meant to move anyone. Just a story, retold through song. "You make me happy when skies are gray." The entire hall fell silent. People stopped chewing gum, stopped checking their phones. Even their heartbeats seemed to pause. Not because the song was complex, but because in that simplicity, something forced them to look inward. A student who had trained for 6 years in New York slowly lowered her pen. A faculty judge, once a national competition juror, furrowed his brow, then exhaled. Not with criticism, with emotion. Please don't take my sunshine away. When the final note fell, like a single thread settling in the air, the auditorium hung in aching stillness. And then, one person stood up, none other than Tracy Carter. She stood tall, hand over her heart, eyes brimming, but silent. No clapping, no cheering, just standing, like a lighthouse in the fog, a pillar of light and strength. And the room awakened. Another person stood, then another. And then the entire auditorium rose together, not in response to applause, but in response to something deeper. Gratitude. Applause thundered, at first scattered, then rolling like a wave. A journalist with a camera lowered his lens, wiping his glasses with a tissue. A teacher laid down their pen and bowed their head. Eliza, the one who once mocked Emily, turned to her friend and whispered, "I was wrong." On stage, Emily bowed. No trembling, no tears. Just quiet, as if she had returned something precious to the world, a memory they had all forgotten how to hold. The light on her face no longer glorified her. It revealed something truer, that some voices don't need to be loud, to echo in people's hearts, forever. The next morning, Phoenix woke to gentle sunshine and a cool breeze lingering after the night's rain. Tracy and Emily sat in a small diner not far from the conservatory, a place with chipped wooden tables and mismatched white porcelain coffee cups. Tracy cut a piece of pancake and placed it on her daughter's plate, but her eyes never left Emily's face. She hadn't said much since the performance, just smiled softly every time their eyes met. Emily looked at her mother, then set her fork down. "Mom, do you think they really heard me?" Tracy didn't answer right away. She poured more orange juice into her daughter's glass, then said, "I didn't need them to hear you, because I've always heard you. But if yesterday they finally heard what I've heard for 13 years, then maybe you won't have to whisper to yourself anymore." Those words made Emily's eyes glisten, not from sadness, but from knowing that the truest things don't need to be shouted, only felt by someone close enough to listen. Just then, the diner door opened. A tall, elegant woman stepped inside, her hair in a neat bun. It was Ava Reynolds. She smiled warmly when she spotted the two of them. "I've been looking all over for you. Sorry to interrupt breakfast, but the Academy Board had an emergency meeting this morning." Tracy tensed slightly. Emily straightened in her seat. Ava sat down across from them, her eyes shining with something unspoken. "They reviewed your entire performance from yesterday, and," she paused, not for effect, but to ensure that every word landed. "Emily, they've decided to offer you a place in the long-term training program. Full scholarship, no re-audition, no application process. You're already in." Tracy exhaled, as if a stone had been lifted from her chest. Her hand trembled as it rested on Emily's prize. Emily sat silent for a few seconds. She looked down at her orange juice, then up. "Miss Ava, yes? If I say yes, can I bring my mom with me?" The room seemed to pause with that question. Ava didn't respond immediately. She looked at Emily, then turned to Tracy, who sat still, like a porcelain statue. And finally, she smiled gently. "If your mother is the reason you sing the way you do, then I'd say the school would be honored to have her here too." That simple answer made Emily laugh, not out of amusement, but because it was the sentence she had longed to hear her whole life. A week later, Emily officially moved into the conservatory's main dorms. But this time, not with Eliza or any other student. The school had made a special arrangement, a small double room in the guest quarters, so Tracy could stay too. She would volunteer at the library and help tend the campus garden. On move-in day, Emily brought only one canvas suitcase, her old notebook, and a small framed photo of her mother standing on stage, hand over heart. Eliza showed up at her door unexpectedly. She stood for a moment, awkward, unsure of what to say. Finally, she managed. "I didn't think you were that kind of person, but that night I cried." Emily said nothing. She simply welcomed her in. The two sat side by side, shared an apple, and for the first time, silence no longer meant distance. A month later, Emily wrote her first original song. It didn't sound like Scarborough Fair or You Are My Sunshine. It was a nameless melody, written from scattered memories. The sound of laundry, her mother's voice, the light of a flashlight taped to a tin roof. The song was never published. But it was performed one evening at a small gathering of students and faculty when Emily was invited to sing for the incoming class. And when she sang, the first person to rise as promised for life was her mother, hand over heart, silent, proud, and glowing with light. Years later, during a live television interview when she was already a celebrated singer and songwriter, Emily Carter was asked, "What was the moment that changed your life forever?" She didn't need to think long. She didn't mention titles. She didn't speak of scholarships or her first award. She simply smiled and answered in a voice as soft as a breeze. "It was the moment my mother stood up, in a room full of strangers. When no one else knew who I was, she already did, and for me that was enough to keep going." We live in a world that applauds winners, but rarely stands for the ones still trying to sing with their hearts. But sometimes, just one person standing up, not for the perfect voice, but because they hear the truth in it, is enough to turn an invisible girl into someone who touches the world. Emily wasn't born to be applauded. She was born to remind us that the simplest things, when sung with the heart, can melt even the coldest room. And the truest light doesn't come from the spotlight. It comes from the first person who stands up for you.